In this video, it's literally going to be a full course teaching you every single method there is to string a racket. Most people don't know that there's actually 3 different ways that you can string a racket, and there are some ways that you should never string certain rackets. And most of the videos that I see out there pretty much just tell you one method and say, this is it. No, there's 3 different ways, and it took me a lot of digging and research. And I actually spent like a good chunk of my life actually stringing rackets. I used to work as a stringer at Tennis Plaza, stringing rackets for like literally 6 hours, 5 days a week. And I was actually the official stringer for my D1 college team, Norfolk State University. So there isn't a single racket that I haven't strung. You can see all these over here. You can also go to my Instagram page, The Racquet Stringer with underscores, which has all my string projects. But with that being said, I put a lot of work and research and time into making this video. So if you can go ahead and like, comment any questions or thoughts you might have, and also share this video, and also follow me on Instagram, tennis.god. Shout out to my boy Ramesh behind the camera, former D1 US Naval Academy tennis player, super good at tennis. So if you're looking for lessons, go check him out. But with that being said, timestamps down in the description as well for each different string method. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to talk about before you even get to the racket is to make sure that your stringer has all the equipment. First thing we're actually going to point out are the parts of the stringer. So this is a 6-point mount. I know some of the less expensive stringers are 2-point mount. I highly do not recommend getting those because it only holds your racket at 2 points. And I had a Pure Aero 2015 back in the day where it did that, and it kept like there's just too much tension here and it was cracking. So I highly recommend, first thing, invest in a 6-point stringer. And also that old stringer, I'm not going to say what the name was, but it snapped off at the neck. So it's not really worth getting something that, you know, isn't going to work with you long term. So these 2 things are the clamps. That's going to hold clamp on the string, keep it from losing tension. So how I do that, I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to turn that dial. This dial keeps the clamp from moving along the sides. And again, this clamp right here obviously clamps onto the string. And then there's also a dial right here. If we turn that to the right, I can make it so that this clamp will shut on the string tighter. Okay, that brings us over to this tension knob here, right? I can adjust the tension using this knob. As you can see, this line right here is moving up or down depending on how I turn this back dial here. So if I'm going to string the racket at a higher tension, usually that's when I'm going to make these clamp dials tighter. And then finally, I pull the string back by turning this crank. Okay, so let's say I set, where is this at right now? Okay, let's say this is at 48 pounds. Once the crank is done, this tension knob right here is going to kick out. And once that kicks out, that locks the tension knob. So I literally can't turn it anymore. So again, imagine we have a string in here. We pull it, that knob kicks out automatically, and then it stops, and then that's how I know when the tension's done. Okay, now those are the parts of the stringer. Now, let's get on to our tools here. Make sure you have all these. I'll tell you what came with the stringer. I'll tell you what didn't come with the stringer. Okay. Number 1, we have an awl. You're going to see later on that this is useful for digging holes between strings. The grommet holes of the racket where you need to put another string through. Let's say there's one string already through a hole, but we need to put another one through it. This is going to create space. This should come with the stringer. Tweezers. When we tie the knots, how it pulls the knot tight. But the better alternative to using tweezers, this is a tool that didn't come with this stringer, but I have to buy for like $50. This clamp pulls the string much better. And then finally, you need something that's able to snip the strings. I have a picture on the screen right now that's showing you pretty much a snipper that does or doesn't come with some string models, but it didn't. Nail clippers work perfectly fine to snip the string as well. Okay, there's 5 steps between all 3 string methods that are identical. Number 1, obviously determine what tension you want to use. I'm going to go dig into exactly how you know which tension you should use. Number 2, we cut the strings out, or I guess in this case, this is a completely new racket. I'm going to have to unwrap it and take this plastic out. So then step 2, mount the racket. Step 3, measure the string. And then step 4, do the mains, which is the vertical strings, and the crosses, which is the horizontal strings. Doesn't matter which of the 3 methods that we're going to do. You always do the mains first and then the crosses second, okay? So the 3 different methods that there are 2-piece, which is when you cut the string in half, which ends up having 4 knots at the end of the job. 1-piece, where you make no cuts to the string, and around the world, which is a variation of 1-piece that actually balances the tension out much better. You're going to want to use 2-piece on Yonex rackets and Dunlop rackets. Those rackets you have to, okay? So let's take a look at a Yonex racket here. So Yonex's square elliptical construction makes it so that the shape of pretty much all the strings crossing each other is always square. Let's compare that to Babolat's Pure Aero VS. You can see it's more tall rectangles at the top. It's not as uniform. Whereas here it's uniform all across. So one of the advantages of two-piece is that the tension is even across the entire racket, and then similar deal going on here with the Dunlop racket. But with that being said, any 16 by 19 racket can be strung using two-piece, but that's where it's limited to. If you have a, for example, 18 by 20 racket, like the Babolat Pure Strike 18 by 20, you cannot use two-piece on this. This will not work. I'll also get into the difference between measuring string using a reel versus a pack. I would say, yeah, you could use two-piece for 18 by 20, but you'd be using way more string than necessary, okay? So use two-piece for any 16 by 19 racket, regardless of head size, or especially use two-piece for Yonex and Dunlop rackets because it will warp the frame. They're not meant to be used with any other stringing method. So method number 2 is one piece. You can use that again on any racket except Yonex and Dunlop. Every other racket, even if it's 16 by 19, 18 by 20, doesn't matter, one piece works for that. And then around the world actually also works on every racket, including the Dunlop and Yonex, because that's actually a version of one piece that balances out the tension across the frame. So one piece doesn't actually balance the tension, and you'll see what I mean when we get there. Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about actually step 2, determining the tension that you want. There's 3 things that I have in mind when I'm determining the tension. Number 1 is the stiffness of the frame. The stiffness of a racket is how much the racket contorts when you hit it, and like nobody talks about this at all. Okay, the string is the first thing that the ball makes contact with, so the string determines how much energy gets sent to the frame. If more energy gets sent to the frame, then the stiffness of the racket actually has an effect. Okay, so this is called effective stiffness. If the string has a lower tension, it's absorbing more of the energy, so less energy goes to the frame. Stiffness is on a range of 60 to 70 RA on average per racket, and the stiffer the racket is, the more powerful it is. 70 is like a steel pole, 60 is basically like a pool noodle, okay? Now, the lower you string the tension, the more energy that the string absorbs, so it sends nothing to the frame, right? If we have a stiff frame, we wouldn't want to string it low because we'd want to take advantage of that stiffness. So I know so many people that, for example, try out the Babolat Pure Drive. This is the 2015 edition. The new 2020 edition is out, and they say it's garbage, but they string it at a low tension at like 20 pounds, okay? So if you have a stiff racket, you want to bump the tension up, and if you don't have a stiff racket, you want to lower the tension. So the first racket we're stringing here is the Wilson Ultra, which actually has an RA of 70, so that already tells me that we're going to string this pretty high. All right, so the second thing that I take into consideration when I'm determining whether or not I should string a racket higher or lower is the softness of the string. A string's softness is basically its plasticity. Plasticity is an object's susceptibility to plastic deformation, which means, let's say I punch a hole in something, does that hole stay or does it reform out? So I'm going to unpack both of these strings right now and show you the perfect example, okay? Right here I have a polyester Solenko Hybrid, and right here I have a synthetic gut by Head. So I'm going to take this Hybrid out of the package. I got to cut it first. You're going to see that it's super springy. All right, boom. It's like a slinky, right? Now let's look at this synthetic gut. It's softer, so it's not going to do the same thing. I let it go. Like, what is that? Like, it's barely anything, right? So this thing is like actively slinging back and forth, okay? Whereas here, it's just going to fall. It's not, there's barely any like slinging back and forth, right? Again, compare the two. Like, this one's much more. And polyester will definitely like tie into itself a knot, okay? So elasticity is when an object stretches or changes shape and returns back to it, whereas plasticity is when it changes shape and it stays. So a soft string is something that changes shape and stays. An elastic string is something that changes shape and returns to its original shape. So why is that important as far as determining whether or not I should string higher or lower? If I have a softer string, I'm going to string it lower. Fact of the matter is, yes, stringing lower increases power, but most people don't make the discernment of power that comes from the string versus power that comes from the racket. Because like I said before, if you string too low, you won't even be able to take advantage of the racket stiffness, okay? So what we've got here is a polyester. Now it's not as soft as that synthetic gut right there, but it is softer than most polys, so I'm going to end up stringing it lower, okay? Again, soft, I string lower. Hard or more elastic, I will string higher. That's my second criteria for determining how tight I will string something. The third criteria for determining how tight I will string something is the string density, which is how close the strings are to each other. The string density is determined by the head size and the string pattern. If we have a bigger head, that is going to be a bigger string density. And if we have less strings, that's going to be a bigger string density. So on the left here, I have the Babolat Pure Strike 18 by 20, 98 square inches, 18 vertical strings, 20 horizontal strings, versus the Babolat Pure Drive 2015, 100 square inch head size, 16 vertical strings, 19 horizontal strings. So as you can clearly see, the string density of the Pure Strike is much denser than the string density of the Pure Drive. And one of the biggest myths that I hate being thrown around is the fact that a racket is more spin friendly. You need to understand that there's two ways of generating spin, okay? And rackets with higher string density are optimized for generating spin a different way than rackets with low string density, okay? So let's pretend my fist is the ball. If I have there's two ways of generating spin. Way number one that you see very prevalent in America is brushing behind the ball, meeting the ball at one tangential point, okay? But what you'll see way more common across the rest of the world is closing over the ball. Okay, actually closing over that. How many times do you watch Federer play? He finishes with his racket closed versus Nadal who brushes behind the ball. But most people think, oh, the only way of generating spin is by brushing behind the ball, which is what products like the Topspin Pro are built around, which is a good thing. You should know how to do both, but you need to understand that there's no such thing as one racket being more spin friendly than the other, but rather it's optimized for one way of generating spin, which again leads me to why string density is important for determining tension. If my string is optimized for brushing, I will string at a lower tension. If my string density is optimized for closing, I will string at a higher tension. Higher tensions grab the ball better, lower tensions flex the strings better. No such thing as this racket's better at generating spin than this other racket. You have to determine how you play in order to make that decision for yourself. So with that being said, the Wilson Ultra was literally created to compete with the Babolat Pure Drive. Literally every single brand has a racket with this specifications. 100 square inches, 16 by 19, 70 RA, and 7 points headlight balance. We're not going to get into that right now. The Wilson Ultra is literally that. Yeah, the technology, the composition is different, but those overall specs are pretty much the same. The racket that Curios uses, the Onyx E-Zone, there's a 98 version and a 100 version. The 100 is literally this, and then Dunlop has their own version of that too, and then there's a Head Extreme. So again, every single brand has their 100 square inch, 16 by 19, 70 RA, 7 points headlight version of a racket, right? This is for a student. And again, to summarize, we have a stiff frame, which means I'm going to string it tighter. We have a sort of soft polyester, which means I'm not going to string it super tight, so that's going to lower it a little bit. And then we have open string density, which means I'm also going to string it lower. So I want to optimize it for generating spin by brushing. So we're going to string this at 54 pounds. Step number 2, mount the racket. So I'm going to cut this paper out, okay? Let me show you what it looks like after I cut this paper out if you have a racket with strings in it. There are actually corner scissors you can use to cut out the strings much faster. Oops. Okay, later in the video I'm going to string this Pure Aero VS, the Alcaraz racket. So usually when I cut the string out, I want to kind of start kind of equidistant. Just however you cut it, try to make it balanced, that's all. You want to make the tension loss balanced. See how I'm kind of like switching north, south, east, west here. We don't want one part of the racket being pulled on more than another. When the racket's completely done being strung, the amount of tension on the frame is equal. And then what I like to do, just slide down, slide sideways, slide sideways. Oh, I missed one. Gotta cut this one. And then you can just knock it out, right? It just knocks out really easy. Now this knocks out pretty easy because I restrung this like 2 weeks ago, but if your string has been sitting and melting, it won't come out this easy, just like you know. And also polyester gets knocked out the easiest because it's pretty hard, but synthetic gut does not. So cutting this out now because we are going to do that later. All right, so we're gonna use that later, but let's go back to this Wilson Ultra. Let me unwrap it. All right, on to step 2, mounting the string. Now that we have the tension set at 54 pounds. Now, as you can obviously see, we changed setting here because there's a big mistake that I made when mounting the racket here that I'm gonna show you here. Do not make the mistake that I did, or else, you know, you'll literally mess up the tension of the string, but you'll see what it is real soon, okay? So we want the racket to be mounted at 6 points. Make sure that these top 2 are exactly centered at the top and bottom of the racket. As you can see here in this Wilson racket, Ramesh, stand over here. There's actually a circle up there that lets you know where the center is for the top, okay? So some rackets, Wilson just happened to print that there, all right? So I've got the bottom clamped at 3 points here. And as you can see at the top is not reaching this top part here, okay? So what I need to do is adjust this entire column. Ramesh, aim the camera down here. By loosening it and sliding it closer, okay? All right, actually, let me adjust this bottom one, this other side too, okay? This allows me to move both tables so that the screwing of these 2 top and bottom parts is actually in place, okay? So what happened last time is I was only holding the racket from 5 spots, ignoring this last one, and then the columns kept sifting and sifting, and then even though this is set at 54 pounds, it ended up dropping all the way down to 48 pounds. Now, side note here, okay, let's make sure these are tight as well. Side note here, you can measure the tension of a string based off of the frequency that it produces. I'll show you that at the end, okay? With that being said, we have the racket mounted at all 6 points. All these 6 points are stable. Both of these columns are stable. So now next step, let's measure the string. When you're measuring the string in a pack, it's already there for you. But when you're measuring the string from a reel, you're going to pull 8 arm lengths. So if I had a reel, I would pull 8 arm lengths here. Now, polyester loves to coil itself a lot. My goal when I'm doing two-piece is to find 2 tips, but the way they're going to measure the string for the other 2 methods is going to be different than this. We're going to save that for those sections. But anyways, the reason I want to find these 2 tips is that I can slide my finger down from there until the string folds, and that will be the halfway point of the string where I'll be able to cut it in half. Okay, there you go. So I found the halfway point, and we're going to go ahead and use the nail clippers to snip it right there. Second thing I'm going to do is snip it at an angle so it's to be a little bit sharper. That'll let me put it through the grommet holes better, okay? Now that I've measured the string and cut it in half, which is exclusive to 2-piece, and we're gonna start finally with the mains here. Okay, is the table unlocked? Table's unlocked. Now when you're starting with the mains, the question is, do we start from the bottom or do we start from the top? You have to count, Ramesh, come over here, how many ridges you have at the bottom. If you have 3 ridges at the bottom, then you're going to start at the bottom because our goal is to have 2 strands coming to the top. Now look, if I started from the top, there's no ridge there, so the string wouldn't be wrapping around the frame properly. We want to wrap around those ridges. On the contrary, if you have a racket with 4 ridges at the bottom, see now if I tried to start in the middle there's no ridge there. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no even number ridge in the middle that I'd have to start from, so I'd actually start all the way from the top right there and then go down, okay? So count how many ridges you have in the bottom of the neck of the racket, and that'll tell you whether or not you're starting from the top, whether or not you're starting from the bottom, okay? But for this racket, we're gonna start from the bottom, okay? Hold the tips together as you pull it to make sure that we have an equal length of string on both sides. And now we're ready to get started. Now, whichever side you want to get started on, you're going to clamp the opposite side. If I want to start on the side further away from me, I'm going to clamp the side that's closer to me, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to clamp this right here, turn the dial to make sure the clamp stays in place. And we're going to go ahead and get started with this side. All right, pull it through. Okay, when I pull tension on the string, pull it inside this hole, turn the knob, tension knob comes out. Then, now that we have tension here, we have to go back to the board, clamp it right there. Okay, again, close the clamp, turn the dial. Now we can release tension because we're holding it right there. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to do the first 5 over here, then we're going to do the rest on the other side. You do not want to do it in an entire half and in another half because that's going to have an uneven amount of balance on the frame. So I'm going to do the first 5 mains on the side towards me, then I'm going to do the rest, then I'm going to complete it. Now that I'm here at the bottom of the neck, I'm going to go under the neck, not over the neck, because I don't want to pull tension over the neck. That's going to be pulling tension on the racket in a way that's undesirable. Here we go. Pull it through, rotate, automatically stops when that knob pops out. Release tension over here because I've got it stored over here. All right, and we want to clamp as close to the hole as possible, but this other clamp is a little bit in the way, so that's fine there. I can release tension now. I can go ahead and go back inside, go through the hole, don't lose the tip. Once you go through the second hole, then you pull the rest of the string the way through. Clamp it over here again, rotate, release the stringer clamp, clamp at the top, very close. Do it again, through this hole, through the hole down here, pull it through, spin, clamp, pull, do it again. Last one right here for this side. I'm going to prep the last hole for when I come back to it so I don't have to put it through this hole again. I'm not going to pull it. Now, everything that we did for these 5, we're going to do it on the other side that we didn't start yet, but go all the way to the end. Key note here, as you can see over here, the holes start getting close to each other. So once we get past the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th hole, you're going to see an 8th hole right here is very close, but that one's not actually going to be for our mains, is actually going to be for the crosses. So just think, which hole is equidistant to the one that I've just done? This one's definitely way close. If we compare the distance between this main hole and this main hole, this one's really close, but this one's not. This one's equidistant. The distance between these two and these two is the same. So that's how you differentiate which hole is for the crosses and which hole is for the mains. All right. I'm going to go ahead and do everything that I just showed you. Now, important note here, if this tension knob is too far, we won't be able to go far enough for the right amount of tension to be pulled. So always make sure this thing is pretty close to you. Not too close, or else the actual stringer can't be turned. So, but pretty close, within range. Now, we are on the final hole here. And again, notice how I picked the equidistant holes, not the one that was super close. Okay, but let's say we get all the way down here and you mismeasured it. That's where you can actually use the starting clamp and an extra piece of string that you put through the holes of the starter clamp as extra length, okay, to put through this stringer clamp, okay? So let's say I mismeasured the string right here. Well, I can put this string through the starter clamp, and now the starter clamp's holding the string from the racket that, again, I measured way too short. And then the other extra piece of string that I weaved into the starter clamp can actually be used on the tension pull, which has the same effect as if we pulled the string that's actually coming out of the holes of the racket. Okay? So that's the secondary purpose of the starter clamp that a lot of people don't actually know about if you mismeasure. Most of the time when I mismeasure, I'm like, damn, I messed up. I got to start over, or spend more money on strings. All right, now finally, we got to tie a knot. Pick the hole closest. We have to tie a knot around another mains. We can't just go in an empty hole. We have to go in a hole that's actually already occupied. Now, I cut this string sharp enough so that it fit through, but if it still doesn't fit because you have a thicker string gauge, then use an awl, stick it through the hole to wedge some room, and don't worry, the string's not going to break, as long as you take your time and do it right, to create room. So now that I have this string here, what I'm going to do to tie a knot, I'm going to go over the mains and through the hole that's between the mains and this side that I created right here, pull up with my hand, use the starter clamps to pull it even tighter, and then I'm going to do another one. So we've got 2 regular knots is what this is called, okay? And I'm going to snip it. Then we're done with this side, but I'm not going to release that clamp yet because there's going to be a little bit of tension loss to the knot there. I'm going to come to the other side, finish it the same way that I did this side. There we go. You only really need a foot of length when you are doing this final knot over here. So same thing, over, under, and up through the hole. Pull with the starter clamp. Do another one. Then we're done with the mains. All right, so now we can release both clamps and we're going to get started with the crosses. All right, so there's two ways to start the crosses. I'm going to cut to a clip from the old footage to show you the first way, which is using the fisherman's knot. If you do not have a starter clamp, you will have to use what's called a fisherman's knot. Okay, because again, the starter clamp is $50. It does not come with every single string. So we're going to find one hole at the top here. Fisherman's knot, the loosest hole. This is a pretty loose hole. In order to do a fisherman's knot, I like to start on the right side of one of the main strings. So we're going to tie a knot around a mains string, wherever the loosest hole is, which is right there, okay? So you're gonna create 3 loops. Okay, 1, make sure you don't go over any other string except the one you're tying the knot around, okay? Try a second, do a second loop. 2, do a third loop. 3, now we have 3 loops. We're going to take the front end of the string, go all the way back to the beginning, and go through all 3 of those hoops. Okay? Hold that, pull this back, and you want to pull the top and the back part at the same time. So I want to pull both of those at the same time. Otherwise, some of the hoops are going to be too big. Okay? So there we go. And boom. We've got a closed hoop there. Very, very nice. All right. Now I'm going to, now if, again, this is what you do if you don't have a starter clamp. I'm going to show you what to do if you do have a starter clamp in just a second because it will make it much more easier. Again, if you do not have one and it's in your budget to buy one, okay? Okay, I'm going to come back over here. All right, so I'm going to do my weaving of the string bed. We want the string to be opposite, over, under, over, under, over, under, or under, over, under, over, under, over. It doesn't matter how you start. The only thing that matters is that the string is opposite. So I'm starting over in this case. So then I go under, I push my finger down, push up, push down, push up, push down, push up, push down, push up, push down, until it becomes difficult. And then when it becomes difficult, I'm going to pull a loop. I made a loop. Now it's easy. Down, up, okay? And that's how you weave really fast, okay? Is that you need the string to be loose. And I'm going to show you as you go down how you make sure it's loose, okay? So good sign that you weaved correctly is that the top is over and the bottom is under, or just the top, the first one and the last one are opposites, okay? Now let's get into the method to use if you actually have a starter clamp. All right, so now the second method that actually involves a clamp, which is preferred. Again, clamp costs like $50. It does not come with most stringers for whatever reason, okay? I'm gonna cut this sharp here. All right, cool. I'm gonna weave under, do a knot, over, under, over, under, over, under. So I'm pushing down and up with my fingers, and when it gets too tight for me to push, I'm gonna pull another loop. So your biggest friend when it comes to being able to weave, push down, push up, push down, push up, is there not being less tension in the crosses when you're doing this, okay? So I'm gonna go across the top, weave across the top to the other side. And again, we're going with empty holes here for the crosses. We're not going through a shared hole like we did when we were tying a knot. All right. But now that I've gotten to the other side here, I want about a foot's length of string. Then I'm going to put a starter clamp right here. Okay. Then I'm going to weave the second crosses. When you're weaving the crosses, you want everything to be the opposite. So if this is under, this is over, this is under, this is over, the whole string bed. Up and down should be under, over, under, over. Sideways should be under, over, under, over. For the first 2 crosses that you'll do in any racket, or sometimes the first 3, How the last one ends is how the next one will start. So this one ends under, so we have to start under again. But after the first two or first three, depending on what racket you have, how the last one ends is going to be the opposite of how the next one begins. So if this was any other cross, I'd actually start this one by going over, not the same as this one, which is under. But notice how if I try to do that here, I have two identical. So both of these are under, which is why I don't want. That's how the first two or three mains of your racket are special. Just have an attentive eye to make sure that pretty much things are the opposite, okay? But the one law that always stays the same no matter what is that how you start and how you finish should always be the opposite, okay? That never changes, all right? So I've weaved these first two crosses, and I'm gonna go ahead and pull tension. And that starter clamp is going to make sure that this string stays. So I'm going to actually take the onboard clamps, clamp this top string, turn the dial, clamp this top string, turn the dial, release tension. This top cross is tight, so that means I can let go of the starter clamp, and I'm going to go ahead, cut this shorter, and tie two regular knots like I showed you before that we use to finish off the mains. Okay, so which hole did Wilson make big for me to put the string through? This hole. Okay, find a hole that's open. Every time we tie a knot, it's always going to be shared with a string from the mains, okay? Or just some other string, basically. Two knots like before, same basic knot that I showed you before. If you don't remember, visit the earlier timestamp. All right, gonna clip it like I did before. I'm gonna hold these there, the clamps I mean. Turn the racket, pull it through. This is when I'll lock the table because the table likes to spin when I'm pulling a lot of string. So I lock the table to make sure it doesn't spin. We got a little double knot here, but it's nothing that can't be resolved. Good. So I'm going to do one mains, and I'm going to do another mains. Now, what I was talking about earlier, how these first two have to be the same, bottom, bottom. Well, as you can see, this one's top, and I can't just go top again, or they'll both be on top. So how this one ends is going to be the opposite of how I start the next one. And we can just keep it going like that from there. Okay. Now when I'm weaving, I'm going down and up because I'm trying to go away from tension and up to tension. What you'll see is the string is going to want to form a U shape because just like, you know, air, gas, everything wants to travel from an area of lower pressure to higher pressure. The string wants to travel from an area of higher tension to lower tension. So I don't want U's when I string the racket. I want it to be straight. So what I'm going to do is when I pull through this clamp, I'm going to take my hand and form two fingers here, dial it. These two fingers keep the string stabilized so it stays straight instead of forms a U. Okay? I'm telling you, when you do this by yourself, you're going to see that the string is going to form a U shape going downwards. All right? So we're going to finish the rest of the crosses just like that. Again, I lock the table, pull the string, push it down, unlock the table, weave. Unlocking the table makes it easier to weave. Weave downwards away from tension. Do a loop because I'm going to weave back upwards towards tension, but that loop that I just did makes lower tension. Then pull through the clamp, switch hands, put however many fingers here, turn the dial. These fingers keep the string straight when it's pulled. Unlock, turn the table, lock the table, pull the string. Use the left hand to keep the string from coiling itself because Polly loves to do that. Do another cross. Unlock the table, makes it easier to weave. Weave down towards less tension, loop. Weave up towards more tension, but the loop that we created cancels out that tension. Pull it through the hole. Pull through the tension clamp. Put my two fingers here. Tension. I'm going to do that for the rest of the crosses. Notice how I slide my fingers down to reduce friction, pull down twice because it's cooled down, slide again, and I'm good. But I don't want to be pulling, yanking on it the entire time. We want to reduce friction when we're pulling the string because otherwise the string is literally going to burn into itself. Don't worry about if the string looks like a mess anywhere. The only relevant thing is the fact that you're finding a tip. Anywhere else doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the string looks like a mess. It only matters that you're keeping track of the most important location of the string. So like, don't worry about the string just spontaneously tying into itself like a pair of earbuds that you leave in your pocket. It's not going to do that. It will indeed coil, but it won't form just knots by itself. So you don't need to stress out about the fact that you have a bag of worms dangling over there. It's not a big deal. Pay attention to the direction I'm actually spinning the table. Like I don't keep going in one direction. I switch, 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 switch. Because if I keep going in one direction when I spin the table, that increases the chances that the string that is hanging on the edge there is going to get caught on something. So I only want to go that way, that way, that way, that way. I don't want to keep spinning in one direction. I'm going to turn this dial around because since I'm going down here, if I keep this dial this way, eventually I'm going to run out of room. So usually when I get midway, I turn the dial around so that the dial part is closer to me and that the clamp part is closer to the side that I'm finishing. We're on to our last two mains here. So this one started over, this one's going to start over again. So these first two crosses were where how we ended is how we start the next cross, and same with the last two crosses, but everything else in between is not. Don't need it this long, so I'm going to cut it short for the knot. This hole right here, that works. Okay. Now see this over here, because I exited on top, I want to stay on top when I go back in. I don't want to exit on top and go down the bottom here. And you already know how to do the knot. Over and up, pull, pull again with the starter clamp. Do a second one, over, up, pull with the hand, pull with the starter clamp, clip. We're done. All right, on to the next stringing method. All right, next stringing method, we're going to do one piece on this Puro VS and Racquet that Carlos Alcaraz uses. The newest model actually came out, but they renamed it to the Pure Aero 98. 98 square inches, 16 by 20. Not quite 16 by 19, but still has that extra cross to make it so that two-piece may not be viable on this. There's knobs down here that let you slide these top two columns so you can get the racket clamped in the right spot. All right, so we have the frame mounted. Step 2, measure the string. Like I said before, if you have a whole reel, pull it 8 times. We will not be cutting the string in half using one piece, which is why one piece can be used on any racket unless it's a Yonex or Dunlop. Assuming you did not see what I did in 2-piece and you skipped straight here, that's 100% fine because I'm literally going to re-explain everything. Polyester tends to knot itself, which is not cool. But I'm also going to put Solinco Hybrid-G in this racket. It has a RA of 67, let's see, 16 by 20, so that's a higher string density. RA is lower than 70 though. The racket that we did earlier, the Wilson Ultra, that's an RA of 70. But this is a soft string. You know what, let's go with 55. All right, so I don't need to split the string in half like I did for 2-piece. I only just need to find one end of string. So again, step 1 once we've mounted the racket is do the mains. Okay, now in order to do the mains, we have to find out if we should start from the bottom or the top. So we figure that out by counting how many ridges we have at the bottom. If we have 3 ridges at the bottom, we're going to start at the bottom. But if we have 4 ridges at the bottom, we're going to start at the top because our goal is to have 2 strands going through the middle. So since we have 3 grooves on the bottom there, we're going to start from the bottom, go to the top, okay, go from underneath the neck, all right. And to measure this, I'm going to pull 1 arm length, okay, and a shoulder. Boom, we're good, okay. Now I'm going to clamp it at the bottom, all right? So the side that I measured 1 arm length and the shoulder of is going to be our short side. Here's what we can do. We can do 5 mains on the short side, or we can do 5 mains on the long side, and then do the rest of the crosses. Every single time I do one piece, I like to do 5 mains on the long side first, okay? So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to pull this string up, go and clip it here to make it a little bit sharper. All right? So I'm going to pull this all the way through. Right here is when I'm going to lock the table. So I can just pull the string all the way through. Okay. Then once I see the loop coming close to me, I'm going to bring it up and hold it out here so it doesn't tangle into itself. Good. Hold on to the tip. Okay. Unlock the table. and I'm going to pull tension. Here's how pulling tension works for this machine. I'm going to put the string through that tension clamp, pull it towards me because you see that ridge there, and I'm going to turn the knob. Then what's going to happen once enough tension's on the string is that this knob is going to pop out, and that's how we know we're good. I'm going to take my other clamp, clamp it, dial it, smack that back in. That releases tension, and I'm going to go ahead and do that 4 more times. Again, go under the neck here, not over the neck. We do not want to pull the tension over the neck because that's going to hurt the frame. Again, my left arm here is extended to keep this polyester from coiling itself, which is kind of annoying. All right. Now we want to clamp as close as possible, but this other clamp's kind of getting in the way, and it's fine if we don't get as close as we would like. Almost there. Lock the table. Good to go. All right. And now we've got 5 mains on the long side. I'm just going to set this up over here, the 6th one, but I'm not actually going to pull it. Okay. I'm going to whip this around because I don't want to get caught on anything else as I turn the table in that direction. Okay. Now we're ready for finishing the short side. Same exact process, but we're going to go all the way to the end. Important distinction to make here, once I get to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th hole, we're going to skip this hole here, go to the next one, skip this one, go to the next one. Some of these holes are for the crosses, some of these holes are for the mains. You'll know which ones to pick because these holes are going to be equidistant from each other. So as you can see, these 2 holes are not equidistant from each other, but these 2 are. Okay, so that's really the key to knowing which hole is for the mains and which is the wrong hole to go through for the crosses, which is going to be much later. Again, pull under the neck here because we need to finish the mains first. Here we go. Okay, notice how again I skipped that hole right there. Okay, now we're going to tie a knot after we pull this. So this is the last mains on the short side. Cool. Release tension. I only need about 1 foot of string to tie a knot. So right there, clip it. Too big, it's going to kind of get in the way. You want to pick the hole of the mains closest. This is not an empty hole. We're going to tie the knot around another main. So don't go through an empty hole. Go through the closest mains you can. Modern rackets usually make the holes bigger to fit too. And then we're going to go over and up. Then we're going to grab our starter clamp and then pull it. Good. And we're going to do that again. Over, up, starter clamp to make it even tighter. The tighter the knot, the more the tension maintains itself. Snip it close. Be careful not to lose all your progress and snip the whole thing. And this side is done, but we're not going to release that yet. Okay. Now we're going to finish the long side. The reason this is called the long side is because we're not going to tie this off. After we're done with this side, it's going to be used to start the crosses. Make it a habit to hold onto this tip right here. Again, loosening this string so it does not self-coil, because it will, because that is polyester. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, now that we're at the bottom, we're going to go start the mains. So I'm going to go over that spot right there. And then when we're weaving the crosses, we want to weave by pushing down, pushing up, pushing down, pushing up, or however else you start. Just push one direction, other direction, one direction, other direction. In this case, I'm going down, up, down, up. We're done. Go through the other hole. If you did it right, because the goal with the crosses, the entire string bed, is to have it opposite. Over, under, going sideways and upwards. If you start at the bottom, you should finish at the top. If I started at the top, which I perfectly could have, you should finish at the bottom. In this case, the top and bottom one finish opposites, so we're good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, lock the table, pull my cross through. And for those of you guys who have trouble weaving, I'm going to give you a big tip in a second. Just let me finish this. Okay, so, okay, another small detail here. See how the string pulled through to the bottom? So I've got to go under this string from the bottom again. Do not go on the top of it. Okay, if this is on the bottom, keep the string on the bottom. Okay, so this was going to start over again, which is unusual. Only for the first two crosses that you do is how the last one finishes is how the next one starts. Usually if I start over, then when I finish, it's going to be under, then I've got to start over again. So this is the only time that the end is the same as the beginning of the next one, which only happens with the first two crosses. So here's how I weave. When the string is loose, I can weave with that down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, much easier. I don't need a lot of finger grip, I just need low tension. So as you can see, string over here was on the bottom, so we want to do that again, so it's on the bottom. Bottom, top, bottom. Cool. Very small thing there. It's not going to break your string or whatever, but it's just good for tension maintenance. Okay, so this tension clamp can be released because I tied that mains before. So I'm going to put it right here, and so I can actually let this one go. Right? And we're officially on the crosses now. Let me lock the table. That's annoying. All right. Okay, so we're going to start under. So I guess the first three crosses then, all right, actually have to be the same as the last one finished. But the rest of the crosses will break that rule. Just make sure they're opposite. That's the biggest thing. So this is over, under, over again. So we're good. Okay. Now, the crosses are going to have a tendency to want to pull up or pull down. So you want to hold, in this case, they're going to pull up because they're going to pull in the direction where there's less tension. If I had the crosses start at the top, which some rackets are like that, it's going to want to loop downwards. In this case, the tightness is at the bottom, so it's going to want to loop upwards. So my fingers have got to keep it straight. But there's something that I can actually do to make that much more efficient. Instead of holding my fingers here, which is what I would do if I had an electric stringer, I'll just pull it here, pull around, then come, claw my fingers here, pull the knob. I know, a lot of moves at once. You get fast at it with time. Because we want to keep the string straight. We don't want it looping or anything funky like that. Lock the table. Now I can pull it, because see how the string's looping up already? All right, now I'm pushing the string up to reduce friction. Oh, we got tied on something. Always. There's never a time that I string, maybe like 20% of the time, where the string does not get caught on something. Anyways, the reason I'm pushing it up as I'm pulling the string through is because I don't want the friction to cause the string to sink into itself. I loop so that I have, more string to work with. And also notice that I always have one loose string behind of the one that I actually weave through, because that means there's less tension down here and it makes this easier to weave. Okay, unlock the table. Now it's ready to be pulled through the clamp. Put my fingers here as a claw to keep it straight from pulling into a rainbow. Pull the tension. Now we have a straight string. Pull it through while sliding it to reduce tension. I pull it down twice, and then I just yank it twice. As long as it just doesn't get too hot, it's not going to sink into itself. That's the most important thing. Unlock the table. Unlocking the table makes it easier to weave. Pull a loop here. Now I have less tension, easier to weave. String overall is not that hard to put in. Pull the string through, get my claw grip, pull, string is straight. Tiny details, fellas. That's how you keep it straight instead of rainbowing up, which is really just, it does not look pleasant to the customer either. And the string is gonna sink into itself like a rainbow. I'm pulling it down like that as well to have resistance to that upwards rainbow instead of downwards rainbow. Again, let me know in the comments if you guys have any questions. I'll be very actively responding to this video. Yeah, I'm always spinning the table around so the end that's open is facing me. So that way I can actually pull it. Unlock, makes it easier to weave. Pull it loose, that's what the loop is for. Boom. Right here. Claw grip. I don't know why that was out. And yeah, just keep doing that. Notice I'm going up and then I'm going down. Again, we're going away from the source of tension. That makes it way easier to weave. Tension is the enemy of weaving. The higher you get, or the more closer you are to getting finished, the tighter it's going to get, so the more loops that you have to do when you're weaving it. It's getting tight here at the top, so it's hard to weave. So I have to loop it there, loop it again. All right, so this last one, I usually have to do like a lot of loops. So I don't want all the loops to be on the right side. I'd rather switch it up, left side, right side. Because if I do a lot of loops on just like one side, rather than do right, left, the string is gonna twist, which we don't want. All right, so we're finished. Now we just need to tie a knot. It's not a knot we already know how to do. It's the same exact knot. We're gonna find this hole over here, over, and up through the knot, this hole right here. Make sure you are not looping over more than one string. Use the starter clamp to make it tight. Over and up. Boom. All right, go ahead and clip it. Boom. And we're done with one piece, and now let's go on to the final stringing method. All right, so the final stringing method is around the world, and I'm going to restring this racket with Torbite at 58 pounds, Babolat Pure Strike 18 by 20, string density is higher, racket stiff, string is more elastic than Hyper G, which is really the main difference between Torbite and Hyper G, which is why you'll notice that Torbite's got that pop, that vibrancy to it, because it's elastic. Before you even start doing around the world, you cannot just learn around the world. You need to know how to do one piece first, because around the world's a variation of one piece. I repeat, unless you've strung like 10 rackets or just gotten really familiar with one piece, do not start around the world. Because this is a lot to wrap your mind around. So the number of mains doesn't matter for around the world, the number of crosses matters. All right, so let's go ahead and mount the racket. And again, that was a huge mistake in the beginning there. When we weren't able to clamp it, you want to adjust the actual columns themselves. All right, so next, gonna get the string and measure it. Solinco Torbite. Let's see, it's much springier. This is one of the, oh my God, it sprung right out of the package. We're gonna start it just like we would for one piece. We gotta find out which mains we're gonna go through first, the top or the bottom. Are we gonna hit the mains from the top, or are we gonna hit the mains from the bottom? I'm telling you, dude, really whip this out. Like, don't be gentle. It's worse. It's worse than Hyper G. Two worst polys of all time to string with, Torbite and RPM power is a nightmare. This is what it actually looks like when you're taking the string out of the package. I'll tell you what, if you could figure out a faster way to do this other than buy a reel, let me know. Would love to know. Honestly, when it's long enough, you can just go ahead and get started. There we go. Okay, coils resolved. Now, we've got 4 ridges at the bottom, so if you're paying attention, like I said, you shouldn't even start this unless you've seen and learned how to do one piece. So you know that we're gonna start at the top, okay? Pick the short side, it doesn't really matter. I'll give you a tip here. When the logo is right side up, the short side is going to be on the right side. So we're going to have the short side on the right side. And just like one piece, now that we're down here, I'm going to measure 1, but not a shoulder, 2 arm lengths. So 2 arm lengths instead of 1 arm length and a shoulder, which is what we would do for, one piece. Clamp it right here. This is our short side. Like one piece is our short side and long side. And then we're going to go ahead and do 5 mains for the long side. All right, we're going to go ahead and do 5 mains here. You already know how to do it, so we're just going to skip ahead. For those of you that say 58 pounds is too high, I have given a Pure Strike 18 by 20 3rd generation 58 pounds to tons of students. I explained to them nothing that I explained to you in this video. And before they're using a multi-filament, low tension in a racket, and they come to this racket, they're like, wow, this feels amazing. And beginners have an unbiased perspective on how the racket feels. You need to understand those aspects of literally material science and physics. Stiffer racket, the softness of the string, and the string density all determine how you should string the racket. And of course it does print on the racket the range of tension. Like on this Pure Strike 18 by 20, it's 50 to 59 pounds. And again, 58 is well within that range. But now let's go ahead and do, actually we're not gonna finish the mains on the short side. There's a caveat here. So what we're gonna do is we're going to finish all but the last mains, and instead of routing the last mains to the last mains, we're going to route it to the first cross. You're going to see what I mean here, very unique. All right, so up here is going to be the second to last mains, because if we have an 18 by 20 racket, then half of the mains is 9 mains. So I don't want to clamp that all the way up there. Actually, I want to clamp it a little low. You'll see why. Okay, so if we have 8 done, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then we're 1 away from being done. We're going to leave this here, and we're going to finish the other long side. All right, so the last mains is going to finish all the way down. I'm going to pull it all the way through, and then just like one piece, I'll go under or over, it doesn't matter, start my crosses. We started over, we finished under. The beginning and the end oppose each other, so we're good. Finalize the tension on the last main. And you need a starter clamp for around the world, just saying. All right, so as you can see here, we're gonna pull this through, and the long side is actually gonna finish the mains on the short side. I repeat, the long string will finish the mains on the short side. And the short side will finish at the top mains. Summary. Long string will finish the mains on the short side. The short string will finish at the top mains. So why did I weave this first? If you have an even number of crosses, then the top and bottom crosses will be the opposite. This is under, so I have to go over, okay? And I'll show you in a second the proof that this actually applies to every racket is actually like that. You don't have to be aware of it through any other method, but for around the world you have to be aware of it. So if we look at the 18 by 20 first gen, which is also 18 by 20, this one is under, but all the way at the bottom this one is over, so these two oppose each other. So I'm going to pull tension here, and then I'm going to rest my starter clamp right here. And I can release tension, okay? Because this clamp is going to have to be repurposed for the long string that's all the way down here right now. So I'm going to pull that, because normally the right clamp is for the right side, which would be the short string, but we have to actually apply it to the long string, which is being pulled to the short side from the long side for the first cross all the way on the bottom. I know that sounds super complicated, but hopefully these captions make it make sense. Replay it as many times as you need. Now I have this through, then I'm going to weave my second cross here. All right, now that I have that done, I'm going to tension this final mains on the short side. Good. Then Now that I have it clamped right here, I can release this because this whole thing is the long string. I'll repeat, we started on the left side, we kept going until we got all the way down here, which goes down, across, up on the short side. So there are two clamps. This clamp and this clamp are on the same string. There's no clamp on this string other than the starter clamp. So I can finally release this. So I'm going to release this. This is my short string. I'm going to pull this tension back so I get it back, because once I put that starter clamp up there, it loses like a little bit, a teensy tiny bit of tension, but it's not quite where it was. Now it is where it was. So then I'll go up here, clamp it, lock it, release tension, remove the starter clamp, boom. See how you can get confused here? You probably already are. In that case, go back. I swear, when I first saw this, I was like, bro, like, because I could see that it was working. Like, it definitely worked. It just looked like magic to me. I'm like, this dude's a magician, right? We do 2 regular knots right here, as you should already know how to do. All right, so I can let that go, but I won't do it yet. I can, I just won't. I want to start with this first. I'll have to, like, just trust me. So this is our long string. This right here, our long string. The short string story arc is over because we tied that knot. I'm going to weave 2 crosses like you already know from earlier in this course. And the reason that this clamp is lower is so this second cross here that I'm going to need is free. Otherwise I'd have to move it, pull this through so that when I pull tension there won't be a coiling again. Claw fingers, boom. Release this, again, this is the short side. Don't need it anymore because we triple tied it right here. Repurpose this clamp over to the long side, which is now finishing the mains. Let me make this clamp tighter, as in I'm going to turn this dial. Now I don't need to hold this anymore because this is holding the string. Again, the short string story arc is over. We are now just finishing the crosses. And so what will happen is that the only 2 strings with the lowest tension are at the top and the second to last. So from here, you just weave as usual. Unlike the other 2 string methods, the closer you get to the bottom here, it's going to get really tight because normally there wouldn't be a cross present there, but only around the world string method will there be. Now with that being said, the second way to do this is that you could do 2 more, where you could do 2 more crosses before you weave through that mains over there that we did earlier. This time I just decided to do 1 because I want the loosest string to be the second from last, because if you do 2 more, you go down this way, then go up, then the 4th string from the bottom would be the loosest string, which I don't want because that's too close to the center where the player's actually hitting the ball. All right, last tug. Officially done. Well, not quite. Got to make the knot right here. Pull with the starter clamp. Do it again. Clip it close, but not too close. Unclamp. Unmount. Now we're done. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. You'll see the Instagram tags on the screen right now. And don't forget also to like, comment any questions you have down below, and subscribe to my YouTube channel because I've got a ton more videos just talking about things that no one ever talks about in the sport of tennis, like this one. Again, I don't know a single video that teaches all 3 methods. I do a lot of research and a lot of training. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.